Good day, everyone. So welcome to our week 4, which is building the qualitative research study. Okay, so this is very important, especially in your preliminary stages of research, because stating your research questions here or developing your problem is your guide or would serve as your guide throughout your research study. Okay, so before everything else, let us first read the following objectives. First, state research questions, indicate scope and the limitations of research, cite benefits and beneficiaries of research, and present the written statement of the problem. All right. So your statement of the problem here, class, consists of the general problem and the specific problems. So those are your research questions. And this should be your output for the whole week. Now, before we proceed to writing your statement of the problem, of course, the first thing that we are going to do is that you have to choose your topic, okay? But before everything else, these should be the guidelines. It should be focused on a single problem or issue, okay? So when you choose a topic, it should be a single issue only, or it should be focused on a single problem and no other sub-problems. Or wala siyang ibang problems na tinutukoy. Okay? Number 2, it should be researchable. Okay? So when you choose your topic, it should be researchable. Okay? It should have other theories or ideas. It should have other background information. Okay, magre-research ka. If you are going to research and um, the sources are not available, then that means your research is not that reliable. Number 3, feasible enough. Anong ibig sabihin ng feasible? Pag sinabi nating feasible, it is finished on or before the time frame or indicated time frame. Dapat matapos mo siya. So, kayo, since we only have one SEM and that is equivalent to 6 months, then the research should be finished in 6 months. Number 4, specific enough to answer thoroughly. Okay. So your research questions should be specific enough. Complex enough to develop the answer over the space of a thesis or paper. And of course, it should be relevant to your field of study or society more broadly. So I'm going to give to you specific examples here. All right. So please read the other examples in the module. So I have simplified here some examples for you to understand. Okay, so tuloy-tuloy ito. Okay, for example, in our sample topic, the topic is all about coping mechanisms. Anong ibig sabihin ng coping mechanisms? Ito yung mga mechanisms na ginagawa natin para makakope up sa isang bagay. Okay, so under sample topic, we have the research title. Ayan. The coping mechanisms toward modular learning among the senior high school students of St. Teresita's Academy of Ertao Incorporated. So we only have one variable here, class. Okay? We only have one variable here, which is the coping mechanisms. Which means, ito lang yung ating hahanapin. The coping mechanisms toward modular learning. Okay, anong ibig sabihin yan? Ano yung mga mechanisms na ginagawa ninyo? Okay, ano yung mga coping mechanisms? What are your strategies toward modular learning? Since you are not used to modular learning and we are used to face-to-face learning. Therefore, kailangan natin mag-adjust, di ba? So, in modular learning, since you have experienced modular learning for the first time, then what are the coping mechanisms that you are doing? Okay, marami yan. Okay, so isa lang yung hanapin natin dyan, which is coping mechanisms. Now, that is the research title. Of course, after the research title, let us proceed to the statement of the problem. Okay, the statement of the problem is the most important part since yung sinabi ko kanina, this would be your guide throughout your whole study. Okay, pag sinabi nating general problem, this is giving you the overview of your study, the overview of the purpose of your study. So, ang example here na binigay ko is, the study aims to determine the different coping mechanisms of the senior high school students of St. Teresita's Academy of Artao Incorporated. So, that is our general problem. It aims to determine the different coping mechanisms. Wala nang ibang nahalo, di ba? Okay. So, wala nang ibang nahalo, meaning focus lang tayo sa isang problem, which is to determine the different coping mechanisms. Wala nang iba. Okay? So, after the general problem, himay-himayin natin siya into different specific problems. Okay? So to my previous students before, you already know this one. So when we say specific problems, we are dividing the general problem into sub-parts. Okay, so for example, in number 1, what are the different coping mechanisms of the respondents? So dito, by means of interview, by means of um, being with the respondents or the other instruments that you are using, hahanapin nyo kung ano yung mga iba't ibang coping mechanisms nila. Okay, and then you are going to list them out. The next one, how do they perceive the effectivity of these coping mechanisms they are applying? Okay, so saan pa rin tayo? Sa coping mechanisms pa rin tayo, di ba? The difference is that paano nila napaperceive yung effectivity ng kanilang ginagawa. Right? How do they perceive the effectivity of their coping mechanisms? Do they think their coping mechanisms are effective or not? In what way? Ayan. So dahil qualitative research tayo, you have to ask them why. You have to ask them how. How do you think your coping mechanisms are effective? Okay. Paano mo nasabing yung coping mechanisms mo ay effective? Paano mo masasabing hindi to effective? Okay? Yun. So yun yung hahanapin natin sa problem number 2. And then your problem number 3 is, to which theory or basis did they get the idea regarding their coping mechanisms? Of course, hindi naman nila inisip yung coping mechanism na yun nasa kanila mismo, right? Of course, they have a theory or they have a basis. Saan kaya nila natutunan yung coping mechanism na yun? Okay, so as you can observe, in qualitative research class, we are determining the problem, the nature of the problem. Why did this problem occur? Or how did they get over this problem? Right? Hindi tulad sa ibang researches, for example, in comparative and correlational na ba pinagkahambing tayo na different variables. In here, you are only going to study the problem itself. Okay. So as you can observe, nagpo-focus lang tayo dun sa isang part, dun sa coping mechanisms. Ulitin natin. Number 1, what are the different coping mechanisms of the respondents? How do they perceive the effectivity of these coping mechanisms they are applying? Kung gaano ba siya ka-effective, kung effective ba siya or hindi. Of course, by means of your instruments, by means of interview, malalaman nyo yun. Next, to which theory or basis did they get the idea regarding their coping mechanisms? Saan kaya nila binasa yung coping mechanisms sila na yun? Okay? So, this would be your guide throughout your whole research. Wala ka nang hahanaping iba. Now, speaking of scope and delimitation, ayan na, lalabas yung scope and delimitation. What is a scope and what is delimitation? So, scope refers to which extent the area of the study is applied or studied. It also explains the different factors that are affected in the study. So, pag sinabi nating scope, yun yung to which extent, hanggang saan darating or hanggang saan yung mararating ng research, hanggang saan yung topic na pwedeng marating ng research. Okay. Pag sinabi naman nating the limitation, what are the boundaries of your research? Okay. Saan siya nalilimit? Ano yung mga bagay or what are the concepts that the study is not allowed to explore? Right? So, if we have a scope, then we also have the limitations because these further studies might not be significant to the purpose of your study anymore. Therefore, huwag mo na siyang aralin. Doon ka lang sa scope mo. Now, I have made here a sample scope and delimitation of the study. Okay, so doon pa rin tayo sa, what do we call that one? Coping mechanisms. Okay, doon pa rin tayo sa coping mechanisms. Now, The texts in the yellow color is determining the scope, and the text in the white color is determining the delimitation of the study. Okay, so this is very specific. This study is focused on determining the different coping mechanisms that the senior high school students are applying in their modular learning. It also aims to determine their perceptions about the effectivity of their strategies and to which theories, learning ideas, or theories did they base these coping mechanisms. Now, tumpak ba siya doon sa statement of the problem natin? Tama, di ba? Kasi anong hinahanap natin? What are their different coping mechanisms? Kung ano yung effectivity, kung ano yung mga different coping mechanisms, kung ano yung effectivity, and then saan nila kinuha yung idea ng kanilang coping mechanisms. Now, does that answer your scope? Anong meron sa scope? Determining the different coping mechanisms, determine their perceptions about effectivity, and which theories or learning ideas did they base these coping mechanisms? Now, tumpak ba siya doon sa specific problems natin? Meron. Ngayon, yung delimitation naman, however, this study is only limited in determining the above factors and is not aiming to give further recommendations and solutions regarding coping mechanisms among the respondents. So, wala naman sinabi doon sa specific problems mo na bibigyan mo yung coping mechanisms nila ng further recommendations. Wala naman sinabi doon na bibigyan mo ng solution yung kanilang coping mechanism. Okay. So, kapag naintindihan nyo na yan, your activity for the week is to make your own statement of the problem. Since in your week 2 or in your week 3, you already have identified your problem or your topic, then yung topic ninyong yun, doon sa week 3 ninyo, gagawan nyo siya ng statement of the problem. So yung central question dito on page 21, central question, yun yung general problem ninyo. Sub-question 1, sub-question 2, and sub-question 3 refers to your specific problems. And you have to write the scope and the limitation of your study and the significance of the study. Ngayon, dito naman sa significance of the study, to whom is your study significant? Is it significant to the teachers, to the students, to the future researchers? At bakit ito significant sa kanila? Okay, so for that part, you may ask your classmates. Ayan. You may ask your classmates kung anong gagawin doon. Alam niyo na yan. Okay. This study is significant to the teachers. Why to the teachers? Bakit? To the students, to the future researchers. Ayan. Bakit significant yung research mo sa kanila? Okay. So yun lang. And if you have further questions, please ask me in the GC. Thank you.